Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news, recording this around 1 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. I just share that in case some news has changed. A lot going on in the world. As I'm recording, Vice President Pence had told Congress he would not invoke the 25th Amendment. Jimmy Fallon said it's a tough choice for Pence, invoke the 25th and have MAGA Nation hate you, or refuse and still have MAGA Nation hate you. Kimmel, of course Mike Pence isn't going to do that. He's not going to remove Donald Trump. Mike Pence doesn't even remove his shirt. Fallon, you could tell Pence was nervous because he spent all day slamming milks like it was Friday at 5 p.m. Colbert, you'd think Pence would be into the idea considering the whole hang him thing. I'll jump in here and go, yeah, you would think that. Like, if you guys wanted to hang me, I would not support you. Back to Colbert, but you would be dead wrong because after days of silence, the president and Mike Pence spoke for the first time, meeting in the Oval Office, and agreed that those who broke the law and stormed the Capitol last week do not represent their policy of America first. Well, of course, this mob violence wasn't America first. It was Germany first. So after all, it's all wonder under the gallows now. Is there a joke in there, Stephen? That was quite serious. Fallon, yeah, we've all been in Pence's shoes. You know what I mean? That uncomfortable meeting with your boss after he sends a crazed mob of vengeful rioters to zip tie you. Seth Meyers, the president and Pence reportedly spoke in the Oval Office for the first time since last week's attack on the Capitol, which had to be pretty awkward, but don't worry, Trump accepted Pence's apology. You probably saw the president went down to Alamo, Texas. Jimmy Kimmel said Big T flew to Alamo, Texas today to brag about his wall and to remind the American people that he's not just a dangerous megalomaniac, he's also a racist. Seth Meyers, meanwhile, a confused Rudy Giuliani, waited patiently 300 miles away at Al's Ammo. It's pretty good. Kimmel, it was very wise of Trump to take a victory lap at the border the same week his supporters showed the world that walls serve almost no purpose whatsoever when it comes to keeping people who want in out. Corden, well, that's a wrap on a flawless administration. Fallon, when they heard Trump was coming to the border, Mexico was like, whew, thank God that wall is here. Drop the mic, Jimmy Fallon. That is just a great joke. Fallon, you know your presidency is off the rails when you have to distract from your attempted coup with your giant symbol of racism. Corden, what a nice reminder of how much the president hates people storming barriers and entering places they aren't legally allowed. Fallon, when asked what he was doing there, Trump said, I'm just planning my escape. And Fallon said, yep, Trump visited the border in the town of Alamo, Texas. He was like, thanks to me, everyone will remember Alamo. Now, I thought this was interesting. All those jokes there, I cribbed from the New York Times does a nice recap every day. Someone else who does a recap every day is The Guardian. And I found it interesting that The Guardian polled serious things, not jokes. So this next segment here will be serious, but it's done by the late night hosts, which is how I justify putting it in here, and I think it's interesting. Seth Meyers said, let me begin by doing my part to begin the healing process, to bring down the temperature and tone down the rhetoric by saying this, F you cretinous insurrectionist gargoyles. You guys incited a violent mob that rampaged across the Capitol trying to overthrow the government, and now you want us to see unity and healing? I'd call you craven, soulless ghouls, but in the case of these seditionist dip-esses, they're more like soul-devouring ghouls. That's Seth Meyers, Late Night with Seth Meyers, previously hosted by Jimmy Fallon, Conan O'Brien, and David Letterman. And we've got the host of the 12:30 NBC show saying, F you cretinous insurrectionist gargoyles. What has happened? Stephen Colbert talked about some people were comparing the insurrection incident to 9/11, and Colbert said, I want to point out, no Americans were cheering for the terrorists back then. No one was making excuses for the terrorists. No one was pretending that they weren't terrorists. And now that we've had some time to learn more and see more of what happened on the terrible day last week, all I can think is, oh, Stephen from last week, you sweet, naive child, how could you have been so calm? Because this attack was far worse than it first looked. The terrorists who stormed the Capitol weren't just a bunch of yahoos fed a steady diet of lies, vape juice, and Monster Energy drink. This was a coordinated and planned attempt to terrorize, if not kill, our nation's elected leaders. Stephen Colbert, 11:30 slot on CBS. David Letterman's old slot. I got a text. Let's see who it is. You heard the text, right? It is my son. He wrote, I'm confused. I'm leaving that in. He was wondering why I was telling him to get strawberries. Because there's no strawberries. And I know you're going to want strawberries later. He goes to the supermarket, buys bananas. We digress. We were in the middle of an insurrection, and now we're talking about what fruit my son should pick up at the supermarket. Jimmy Kimmel. The First Lady wrote she was disappointed and disheartened with what happened last week, but decried the salacious gossip, unwarranted personal attacks, and false misleading accusations on me, Melania, from people who are looking to be more relevant and have an agenda. Kimmel said, I have no idea what salacious gossip she's talking about, but now I'm definitely going to Google it to find out. Melania said this is a time for healing, not division. That's a talking point a lot of these complicit Republicans are spewing now. It's a time for healing, and I'm all for healing, but before we heal, we need to make sure the surgery is finished and there's still a large cancerous tumor that needs to be removed. Those are the late-night hosts. And that last section was from The Guardian. I think it's interesting that, right, they isolate different things. I've got a lot of comedy stuff coming up, including a cool article from the New York Times about Chris Rock, but let's take the break here. From the New York Times, this headline, Chris Rock re-edits a special and the result is fascinating. With Total Blackout, the Tamborine extended cut, the comic effectively erases the stamp of the original director, Bo Burnham, and turns in a less intimate show. The Times went deep here. I'm going to read a lot of it, but it's a long article you should definitely read on NewYorkTimes.com. They said, Total Blackout, the Tamborine extended cut, released on Netflix on Tuesday, will be fascinating for comedy nerds, not just because it adds new jokes with almost 40 minutes of extra material. It also represents a key turning point in the balance of power between comic and director, with Chris Rock reclaiming control. He effectively erases the stamp of the director, even replacing Burnham in the credits with his own name, and produces a new special with most of the same shots, whose differences are subtle but significant. Burnham's slick cinematic flourishes are taken out. Gone is the triple repetition, along with quick cutting camera angles of the first three words of the opening joke. Now that's interesting to me. If you listen every day, you've heard me say that I did not enjoy Hannibal Buress's last special because of all the quick edits on it and the stylistic sheen put on the special. I'd love to see just a normal version of Hannibal's Miami special. The Times writes, the most important contrast is in the comic's discussion of his own infidelity. Until Tamborine, Rock was known as a social commentator who mostly kept his private life at a distance, but addressing his divorce and his responsibility for the failure of his marriage, Rock made the most vulnerable, introspective comedy of his career. Burnham was drawn to this and focused on it. When Rock confessed his mistakes, the Bo Burnham cut moved into a rare close-up, and he stayed on Chris Rock's face with no cutaway shots as Chris talked about cheating on his wife. When the crowd chuckled, Rock looked grave, emphasizing that he was not proud. He said he knew what people were thinking. What is wrong with men? In Chris Rock's version, he removes the extreme close-up. Rock adds a new shot, a mouse-eye view of the star from the front of the stage, partly obscured by what appears to be a member of the audience. The new angle looks up at the performer in awe. What sticks with you in the original is the setup, the admission of cheating with three women, and the specificity of the confession. In the extended cut, it's the punchline, as Chris Rock anticipates the audience response and contrasts the shock from women with the more blasé response of men. The joke being, 3, that's it, just 3. It's the same joke, but the direction changes the effect. Really good article. They really dove in. It is called Chris Rock Re-Edits a Special, and the result is fascinating. You'll find that in the New York Times. Rolling Stone also wrote about the special. Chris Rock talks classic showbiz rivalries with Dave Chappelle and Arsenio Hall in a clip from the special. In a clip, Chappelle, Rock, and Hall are sharing their mutual admiration for each other backstage, which prompts Arsenio to remark that he would have loved to have seen such camaraderie back in the day. He mentions the legendary feud between Prince and Michael Jackson, while Chris Rock adds there was always some tension between Eddie Murphy and Richard Pryor. I didn't know that. Really? I mean, I could see that because, candidly, Eddie Murphy's act is a lift of Richard Pryor. I know Eddie's great, and I'm of the age of I came up on Eddie and discovered Richard later. Like, I knew Richard existed, but I didn't see Live at the Sunset Strip in theaters. But you watch Eddie Murphy walking around the stage in a red leather suit, and go back and watch Richard Pryor walking around the stage in a red leather suit, and the kind of voices Eddie does in those two specials, it's a lift of Richard Pryor. Back to Rolling Stone, that prompts Arsenio to relay the story of the one time he saw Pryor and Murphy in a room together. Arsenio recalls that Richard Pryor was on stage performing when he received a note that Eddie was in the room. Pryor interrupted his set and essentially challenged Eddie Murphy to take the stage and prove his mettle. Murphy accepted, and Pryor proceeded to sit on the steps leading up to the stage rather than leaving it completely. Arsenio says for Eddie, it's like Richard's sitting here, and Eddie turns the MFer out. And Richard stands at the end. Eddie comes to the steps and they walk away together. It was the greatest effing moment. That is a great story. Chris Rock, Total Blackout, the Tamborine extended cut. You'll find it on Netflix now. Got a couple other things, but they can wait for tomorrow. 2 meaty topics today. I want to dive into some feedback, and then I'm actually going to break character at the end here, so stay tuned. First, the feedback. You can rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcast. DCRN15 did. DCRN15 gave 4 stars and wrote, Sarah Cooper killing your show. The review, like the show, but the constant criticism of Sarah Cooper and other comedians is annoying. There's enough criticism and negativity out there. Keep the laughs up and lose the jealousy. DCRN15, thank you. That's good feedback. Honestly, the last 4 episodes I didn't love. I don't know if I was off my game or the news was a little thin. Today I feel pretty good about, but the last 4 I didn't love. As for Sarah, I've got a bit there. I usually qualify her. I won't do it here because I want to be respectful of your comment. So I think I will quote Mirror Mirror Spock for my Trekkies out there when he took some advice from Captain Kirk and said, I shall consider it. DCRN15, thank you for writing in. And then I heard from Rob on Twitter. Rob tweeted, I like Bob's Burgers better than Schitt's Creek. And I wrote back to Rob, and I'm like, wait, you're claiming you've actually seen Bob's Burgers? I might have to interview you on the show. And I'm like, all right, I'll put that in the end of the podcast. And then I went to Google to see what was up with Bob's Burgers. Figured, I'll do the bit here about Rob. I'll do the bit about how Bob's Burgers doesn't exist. And then, see if there's a story there and do some shtick. You've all heard me do the shtick. Here's where I break character. So I type Bob's Burgers into Google. Here's what came up. Dave Creek, best known as lead character designer for the popular Fox animated series Bob's Burgers, has died following a skydiving accident. Dave Creek died last week after suffering injuries in a skydiving accident. At this moment, it's unclear exactly what his specific injuries were. Holy cow. Life is short, my friends. Enjoy every day. Stay close to your loved ones. That's your comedy news for today. You can follow the show on Spotify, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Overcast, or wherever you get your shows, and I'll see you tomorrow.